Hey, welcome
Yes.
to the Ground Level AI podcast.
Totally my pleasure. Congrats on your first 2 months. Is that right?
It's 2 months now.
Wow.
Easy. And you're at 10 months, 9 months,
I think
a million months?
a couple of days will be 9 months, though it feels simultaneously like 2 months and like 2 years, if that makes sense.
Yes. Well, you are a journalist and founder of The Aisle, which focuses on retail and the AI boom and tech related to retail, which you've been covering for, a couple decades now, I guess.
Wow, don't say that. Yeah, I'd say I started covering e-commerce in 2013. And for large parts of the last, I guess, what is that, 13 years. I swear I'm pretty good at math, just not right then. The last 13 years, sort of future of retail and the intersection of technology and retail and e-commerce has been has been my sweet spot that I've really enjoyed nerding out on.
Did you see the AI boom coming for e-commerce? Was that something you saw coming down the pike? Even before ChatGPT came out?
Well, I had a book come out, my first and only book, Winner Sells All, which is about Amazon Walmart's sort of rivalry over the last few decades. That came out in June of 23. I stopped working on it, I think, in the fall of 22 because of the ridiculous lead times in print publishing. And I believe the fall of 22 was the dawn of ChatGPT, at least to the public. And I don't believe the words artificial intelligence appear in my book. So I would say, maybe there's a sequel. I'd heard for years sort of a lot about machine learning and predictive analytics, but I'd be lying if I said I was sort of in the weeds enough to predict what we've seen the last, I guess, almost 3 years. 4 years, sorry, the last 4 years almost.
You and I worked together at Fortune right before you left to found The Aisle. And, I think your coverage is so great. I'm a subscriber to The Aisle because I used to cover retail myself. Before I started covering AI, I was covering a lot of retail tech, including at the very beginning of the e-commerce days. And I know how long it took for real e-commerce to become, something that consumers felt comfortable with, that payments companies had really figured out, that brands were really prioritizing. So I've been so curious about how this AI boom has played out in retail. And that's really one of the big reasons I wanted to speak with you. Also because you might remember that I hate shopping. So I'm a big fan of e-commerce because I hate going into a physical store and trying on clothes unless I really have to. I love shopping online and I use chatbots like ChatGPT to research and shop. You and I even went to an OpenAI media breakfast about, their new
A very swanky one.
It was a very swanky one, and they were touting their new shopping agent basically. And that was over a year ago.
It was the week I launched The Aisle. So it was November. It was right before sort of like the Black Friday. They were trying to squeeze it in ahead of like the Black Friday
That's right.
shopping weekend.
Right. It was right before like the holiday season. And it seemed like, oh, well, then this is it. This is the end of the story. And of course it has not been, as you've been so well covering in The Aisle. And so I wanted to ask you sort of a broad question. Like, there's such a vision about this. It feels like everyone is salivating about this opportunity. But, I guess the first thing I would ask, do consumers really want AI to shop for them or to interact with AI in this way?
That is really the only question that matters. And you might be surprised how many times you see product announcements and you're thinking, or I'm thinking in my head, like, who actually wants this thing? So I'd say like the last 9 months of coverage. Well, let me back up for a second. I sort of played down my knowledge of the space, at least seeing it coming years ago. The reason I launched the aisle and left, a job I really enjoyed at Fortune was because over the prior year, I had talked to retail executives, e-commerce executives, and folks building inside AI labs and startups who were convinced that we were going to see the most disruption in sort of online shopping and the future of retail that we'd seen. And I believe this since, maybe mobile phones and sort of mobile commerce came to be, or going either further back, like the Amazon Prime's launch, which really did reshape the expectations of consumers around convenience. And that was back in, that's over 20 years ago now. So I was confident making the leap because there was so much attention from the space on this. And I think a lot of it deserved. That said, the last 9 months has kind of been, I think, a wake-up call for a lot of both AI labs, but also retailers about what consumers do and do want right now from AI. So you mentioned research, more detailed research, price comparison, although pricing is not really a strength of, price comparison is not yet really a strength of LLMs, chatbots, just diving really deep on a, product category. If you're an enthusiast, like all those things, I think consumers want, sort of need help with, and I think are getting a lot. I mean, the data shows like a lot of people are using that for those things. Now, handing off decision making to an agent, I just think that's something that will appeal to sort of a small percentage of people who maybe for repeat orders, subscribe and save at Amazon has been popular for some reasons for so long, but also other people feel like it's sort of too restrictive. And so sort of custom reordering, I think, is something where people will depend on agents. But I think again, the last 9 months has been a wake-up call for people who aren't from retail, how hard sort of online commerce can be from a data perspective, cleaning up data, making sure it's structured. And then also a lot of consumers are using for research, but not much else.
Right. Even without an autonomous AI doing the shopping for you, even if you're doing shopping within, say, ChatGPT, and at that event we were at, the swanky one from OpenAI, the idea of, being able to pay right within ChatGPT was considered to be a big deal. And that proved to be harder than it seemed. Why are payments so hard?
Let me unpack that a little bit. I think sort of having a checkout, having a consumer checkout on a non-commerce surface, as the tech companies or AI companies would call it, basically a website that was not built for e-commerce, but then getting a consumer to trust it or to like make the user experience case that it's easier for them to check out there has just been something that has been very hard for the last decade, like pre-Gen AI. So the social media companies all tried launching, I covered this for better or worse very deeply for a few years. Twitter had a buy button that they launched on tweets. Google has gone through, I wrote recently, it feels like 10 different efforts to make Google search a place you can actually transact. And then Instagram and Instagram, which probably should have the best shot because of how visual it is, all of them have failed in different regards over the years at sort of getting to a place where both the technology is working well enough and consumers want it enough to make those surfaces places people want to not just research or browse, but actually transact. And so with that history, it's an uphill battle for anyone. And ChatGPT, as you alluded to, they launched something called instant checkout. I think they found out both on like the product feed and product data side that they were not always surfacing the exact right product at the right price. That was one piece. And I think consumers, like, e-commerce is pretty easy. Like you talked about hating shopping but loving e-commerce, like there's a lot of talk about removing the friction of e-commerce through AI. Like, it's not very, like, I could sit in my pajamas on my couch and buy something from across the world. That's pretty darn easy. And so I think, you know, like clicking from research on ChatGPT over to a retailer site that is made for transacting, I think is just what most people right now, at least, are going to choose. And the last point I'd make is chatbots is, you know, I think ChatGPT at the event we were at, they talked about making shopping a little more visual on the service, but like blocks of text is not an enjoyable, you know, for people who enjoy sort of the entertainment of browsing, whether in real life stores or online, like blocks of text don't really do that for you. And so I think we've heard Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky talk about like chatbots not being sort of great visual experiences for online shopping. Andy Jassy at Amazon has sort of made the same point. Now he's also talking his own game, but made the same point about these experiences on the chatbots are not actually great visually stimulating shopping experiences. So I think all of that has factored into sort of challenges when it comes to trying to convince someone they should transact on, you know, a chatbot or one of these platforms.
So if you think about over the past year, what do you hear from the brands themselves? You know, whether it's like the biggest brands like Target or Walmart, or, you know, smaller retailers that could potentially be benefiting from AI powered e-commerce. Like, are they disappointed? Are they still rah-rah?
I think the public facing narrative is from like big retailers. Let's put Amazon aside for a second. They're their own beast and yes, kind of always have been. Is we're going to keep leaning in and experimenting with the labs, and you know we're not gonna waste money and resources, but we believe that we see the data that more and more consumers are sort of doing research and discovering new brands via the LLM apps. And so we want to be there. And I think that's fair. What they're not saying publicly is, maybe some are, but not really, is, wow, like we thought the LLM apps, and a lot of this is aimed at like OpenAI, like we thought they got how hard like e-commerce is, and they clearly didn't. And, you know, the about face on offering checkout, like, do we wish that didn't happen? Like maybe, but we respect them for like quickly pulling the plug on something that they realized was not working versus like dragging us all through a couple of years of this. And one note on OpenAI, just this week, I saw someone at the company post a job post for a head of shopping at OpenAI. So they've cycled through some folks. I interviewed someone back in March who is the new head of commerce. It's probably a good reason for me to check in if he's still there. But I think, you know, they're not going to broadcast this, but I think, yeah, they did not realize how hard this space could be. Again, from making sure inventory, you know, real-time inventory has been a challenge for even retail companies that are native retail companies. And so I think that's sort of the not publicized part that retailers, they're a little frustrated. The big ones are a little frustrated by jumping into something and then having it, you know, vanish quickly. But I think the smart ones want to keep leaning in and sort of being friends to the AI labs, and because they don't want what happened to many of them years ago, which is they didn't believe in e-commerce for many years, and then a book is written about him called Winner Sells All, because, you know, Walmart took 20 years to really take e-commerce seriously outside of a few people who didn't have enough power internally to make it happen.
Well, then turning to Amazon, as you say, its own behemoth, its own thing, you know, there have been lawsuits about this already, like with Perplexity, like that you know, if chatbots can't get to Amazon, what is AI shopping then? You know, that's one question.
Right. I'm going to answer the Amazon question, but the other piece about like big retailers and medium-sized brands, a lot of them are putting a lot of their focus, two things. leaning into the LLMs, but in terms of just trying to make sure their brand are showing up in sort of as recommended. So AEO, GEO space, which I continue to be fascinated by just because how polarizing it is. We have companies like Profound valued at $1 billion. And then we have people I respect a lot in the space saying the whole industry is snake oil. Like the LLMs change all the time. This is
Wait, so just to explain that, you're talking about AEO, GEO, which is, as opposed to search engine optimization. These are brands that are optimizing to make sure that AI chatbots like ChatGPT, like Claude, are surfacing.
Are either recommending them in results to certain types of queries from consumers, and or citing them and actually linking out to them. And then there's a whole plethora of startups who are saying, we know how this works and we're going to help you make sure you surface for the queries that matter to you.
And so one of those, right?
I'm sorry, Profound is one. Yes. Profound is one of them. There's companies, I think Bluefish is one, Peak is one. There's one that actually already sold, and that was a telling sign for me. It's a company called Scrunch, a very experienced founding team, and I'm hoping to interview the founder at length soon. But he basically admitted in a short convo with me, he was like, we had a good offer that made sense from an acquirer. I think it was a traditional SEO company. And we don't know what's going to happen in this space. As the LLMs keep changing, there's been some talk that the LLMs are going to try to curb some of the sort of, SEO. There's SEO hacks. Well, these AEO companies have their AEO hacks, which is just pumping out new content if you're a brand, listicle content. I mean, I kind of feel like it's 10, 15 years ago again. Right. So that said, a lot of brands are being sucked in. And again, some are saying they're getting good results from it, sucked into concentrating on this. And then others, and this gets to Amazon, are focused on launching their own assistants on their own site to help their own consumers who land there, have those consumers feel like, I'm used to ChatGPT. Now I can get a similar experience on my favorite retailer site. So that's one area. And then also, eventually building in features that allow things like if a price drops on a retailer site, I can tell their AI assistant to just order that thing for me when it drops. So those are some other things I'm hearing from what retailers are kind of focused on instead of how do they operate with ChatGPT as ChatGPT sort of tries to get consumers to shop there and purchase there instead of their site. They're letting go of that fear for a little bit and focusing on this other stuff. Now you asked me about Amazon. Sorry, that was all.
It's a whole other thing.
Amazon is what they're saying publicly is we will eventually work with some of these horizontal AI apps. So horizontal being not just focused on shopping. So ChatGPT, Claude, but those aren't great shopping experiences yet. This is Andy Jassy on every single earnings call. So instead, we're focused on our own AI assistant, which was called Rufus and now is called, just rolls off your tongue, Alexa for shopping. That's the name of the assistant. I think they'll just end up, at some point, everyone will just call it Alexa, and it'll just be seen as an extension of the voice Alexa. And so that's where Amazon's focus on the consumer side is, as I did not mute my own Alexa. So I don't know if you heard that in the back.
That happens to me all the time. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it.
So yeah, they're pumping out all these numbers about the incremental revenue that their own AI assistant has brought to the company. I think they cited 10 or 12 billion in incremental revenue next year. I'd love to see that methodology, but I think around the industry, shoppers who converse with some sort of AI assistant while shopping on a retail site, they end up converting more. Now, do they already have more intent because they're willing to engage with an AI assistant than the average shopper? So it's hard to prove what conversions would have happened anyway. But I think there is an industry understanding that someone who's doing deeper research with the help of an AI assistant has a better chance of converting and going on to actually make a purchase.
Can you explain the Amazon lawsuit with Perplexity and where it stands? That's one that keeps coming back around to me.
Sure. Yeah, I've written about that a decent amount. I think some people love nerding out on that lawsuit because I'm trying to serve my subscribers' interests. Okay, so the lawsuit essentially is Perplexity has a AI browser called Comet, and part of that you can sort of command this browser agent to do shopping for you, basically to go to Amazon and search around and find on your behalf the best price on something and basically make a purchase for you. That was the theory. It was a little hacky for sure, but like for, people who nerd out on this stuff and love it, it was something that folks were excited about. And Amazon basically was saying, we don't want outside agents, definitely not scraping our data, but they're giving our consumers, that consumer shopping experience is not as good as ours.
Okay.
And so we don't want to allow it. And, they ended up suing Perplexity because Perplexity kept coming up with hacks. I'm using hack,
Right.
in a general sense, not a technical or legal sense, coming up with hacks to where to Amazon systems, it looked like a human was doing the shopping, but it was really was the Comet agent. And so they sued over it. The ramifications I think are pretty serious for the industry, which is who's sort of in control. Like if I want my agent to shop on my behalf, should I be able to do that, whether or not the retailer or site on the other end?
I agree. That's what I think it has larger ramifications and is sort of an example. And that's why people are so interested.
Yeah. And so what happened recently, a lower court basically, put a temporary injunction on use of, sort of against Perplexity and the use of it on the app. And then it went to an appeals court, and the appeals court just ruled in Perplexity's favor, saying basically saying that it was a human was using a tool and it was really the human shopping. I'm like really paraphrasing, and my sister, who's an attorney, would be mortified right now probably. But basically the appeals court ruled in favor of Perplexity. The injunctions ruled against the injunction, said it should have never been sort of issued, and now it's going back to the lower court.
I think that's fascinating. It's sort of these legal issues will sort of keep rolling along until there's some kind of industry agreement of some kind, I suppose.
Yeah, and like Perplexity, I kind of said to their comms team, I'm like, why aren't they talk to me about it because they know I've been writing about it, but I don't know. I think they're in a tough spot as a small player in the space and not a maker of frontier models. And I was kind of like, why don't you guys make a bigger deal of this story? Like your statements say you're like carrying the banner of the independent, of like innovation, but you don't talk about that much outside of, when a ruling happens. And so I've been just curious about that and sort of what their future looks like and narratives around the company. But I'm just a journalist, not a communication strategist.
As a journalist, someone who's been covering the space for so long, I'm so curious what you are really excited about or think is super interesting going forward? Like, are there, like, I'll give an example that has been around for so long and never panned out. And I'm always curious whether it ever will. So for a long time in e-commerce, it was always like virtual fitting rooms were like, would keep coming back
Amen.
around and back around.
You stole my answer. But no, finish your thought and then I'll
Well, and it never seemed to fully pan out. And I'm not clear whether that could happen now with AI or not, but it's fascinating to me that that's something that I feel like everyone would love. And it's never really panned out. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to give away too much because I'm working on some stuff in this area, but I will just say that I struggle with my own sizing as someone who I would call a medium. I'm often between a small and a medium, and that makes online shopping pretty rough, especially as some retailers are trying to pull back on free return, free everything, So I have a lot of personal interest in the space. I think it's really what I've been told recently in the last 6 months is that it's historically really expensive to do some of the online virtual try-on technologies and to do it at any sort of scale. And Google's like dabbled in it, and you still can come across stuff on search where you'll be able to do try-on, but the actual like fitting experience, there are people working on it, and I'll sort of leave it there for now. But that is a space I'm personally and professionally excited about. I'd say the other thing is just broadly, we haven't talked about Shopify.
Yes.
There was I think a lot of investors were curious about whether they would get sort of pummeled in the SaaS
Apocalypse.
Thank you. And instead, they look right now like they're positioned really well. So they've co-developed a protocol with Google called UCP, Universal Commerce Protocol, which basically makes it so retailers can more easily have their products surface and be able to be transacted across all different types of surfaces that aren't e-commerce sites, whether an AI app or otherwise. But then also there is a feeling that the LLM apps have sort of leveled the playing field a little bit in the types of brands they recommend. So smaller brands that may, do business with Shopify, powered by Shopify, they have a better chance right now. There's some studies that show like independent brands have a better chance now than they ever have before of sort of being discovered and noticed. And so Shopify is building all sorts of tools to try to help their customer, which is the small to medium sized brand, sort of continue to stand out, have their product data, AI machine readable. And so they've seen, some very smart analysts I know believe they are like more well positioned than maybe anyone right now to benefit from sort of AI's impact on consumer product discovery and just making online shopping easier and research easier.
So that kind of leads me to my next question, which is around fakes and misinformation in retail. Like there has been so much talk about sites like Etsy, which are becoming like, drowning in AI slop, that people offering things that don't exist. Even things like crochet that are, selling crochet things that can't actually be made, and all this kind of stuff. Like it's crazy. And on Pinterest and Etsy, and I'm assuming on other sites as well. Is that something you hear a lot about? That's crazy.
So I think it's real, and I think those platforms care about it. I have not yet dove in reporting wise,
Okay.
although those are two companies that, in these first 9 months, I've sort of occasionally I'll take a step back and be like, what am I covering deeply that matters, and like where are there companies and storylines that I haven't yet tackled?
There is even on Facebook, like you'll often come upon ads for like little stores. Like there's one that was going around for a while in recent months. It looks like Lego, and it'll show you like a picture of like your own family, like in Lego, and that you can buy it. But it turns out to be a scam. Like you click on it and it's not
So,
real. You won't get it.
so there, I will say, sort of, Gen AI has sort of just made easier the types of scams that have gone on in e-commerce for a long
Okay.
time. So
Yeah.
I can remember a great story maybe 10 years ago. I think it was in BuzzFeed back then, but it was by a reporter who's now has been at the New York Times for a while, and it was basically about how the ads for like clothing ads, like fast fashion clothing ads, on Facebook, what they'd advertise, and then the thing shows up, and it's either something completely different, or it's like a picture of an article of clothing like in a box, or it's just clothing that just looks nothing like it. Anyway, my only point is I think there are some AI slop that has infiltrated sort of every type of industry but I think part of it is just making it easier to try to pull off scams that have existed. And I think this is a good reminder for me that I have not really reported deeply on any of this yet. So we can
What's it's a reminder that this is all a very deep well. You have like endless angles to pursue.
I think that is definitely true. And when I launched the aisle, I think I had some people who thought what I was covering, like AI's impact on commerce and consumer behavior, was really narrow. And then I had other people who were like in the industry who was like, wow, that's really like, that's broad. How are you going to? And that told me I probably had hit a sweet spot.
Mm.
But yes, there is an endless well that is not just about sort of the biggest LLM apps and sort of their impact on how shopping is done online.
Well, that's, when I launched ground level AI, I think of it as like AI as it meets the real world. And, shopping and e-commerce is like a great example of that because it hits the real world in so many ways, whether it's technology, as you say, consumer behavior, even things like policy and, just all sorts of things, security, privacy. I really do think it's such a deep well. Is there any, you did mention that you have some, new reporting coming out on some of that, but are there certain threads that you're following that you're currently really excited about reporting on?
My coverage over the years, like, is focused a lot on Amazon, but increasingly in like the mid 2010s, wow, really old. In the mid 2010s, started to focus on Walmart's efforts to modernize and innovate, and then that led to my book. And so I have actually not done a ton of deep reporting on Walmart since I started, and that's for a variety of reasons. Like, I kind of want to talk to some of their folks in leadership on these things, on these areas, and they've had some new people come in, like what Walmart is up to and how they're thinking about this landscape. I constantly look at, they've done very well the last, call it since the beginning of the pandemic on the digital front, but their gap between them and Amazon is, I'm not sure market share wise, it is actually closed any online. And so I am constantly thinking about like how they're thinking about closing that gap via technology. And so just, what Walmart's been up to is one area I'm going to be focusing on and excited about, as a longtime Walmart history nerd. That's one thing. And then I think what happens in the AEO, GEO space, just because of the venture money going into it and how much brands are sort of relying on these new companies to tell them how best to market, to consumers on these apps and be found, I think is because most brands are in desperate need of new traffic and new consumers. And so that's another space. And I don't know if you have podcast notes or episode notes, but I did one sort of deep piece maybe 6 months ago about how brands are thinking about these companies and the difference between AEO and SEO, and if there is a difference. And I'll continue to do more reporting on that space because a lot of attention is being put on those companies from consumer brands and retail companies.
Well, that's awesome. I'll keep reading Jason Del Rey. It's at readtheaisle.com. And you said you'd give me a link that people can.
I'm gonna offer any consumer anyone can go on and get a 7-day free trial to my paid subscription. I will say I have a very sort of tight paywall. I don't give much away for free, but I am going to give your subscribers and your listeners a bonus longer paid free trial so they can get a taste of what I'm up to.
Awesome. It's good stuff. So I highly recommend it. Thank you, Jason Del Rey.
Thanks so much, Sharon. My pleasure.